Morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm overjoyed that we have these two speakers today, I've got a couple of very short bios, but I'm going to start off by saying Victoria, I've known since I think it's 2008, when we were both in Montreal at the training for the Al Gore speakers teams that went out and delivered the Inconvenient Truth lectures and, customized them to the area. Victoria, of course, was one of the first 20 Canadians trained in Al Gore's first training. Victoria has spent most of her life in Saugeen, Ojibwe Nation, traditional territory as a settler ally, and currently lives in Wyerton with her husband, Jamie. She enjoys spending time with her daughter, Corinna, and grandson, Cregan, in their community at Nayashimigming. I'm sorry if I killed the Ojibwe names. Victoria sits on the board of Saugeen for the Environment, Bagidwad Alliance, which is the territory's Indigenous-led not-for-profit corporation, and on the board of the Climate Reality Project Canada. She served as a municipal councillor in Saugeen Shores from 2006 to 2010, and by invitation worked as a strategic advisor to the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation Band Council for 4 years, doing community engagement and project development. She holds a Bachelor of Independent Studies degree, specializing in democratic education, and a postgraduate certificate in Indigenous governance and administration. I also have a very, very short bio for Natasha Akiwenzi. Natasha is from Lac-Seul First Nation, but lives with her family at Nayashiming, Ontario. She lives on the shores of Georgian Bay with her husband and 3 grown sons. They have a small farm with a horse, chickens, ducks, and goats. They are considered a fishing family and have fished Georgian Bay for many years. Natasha is a member of Bagidwad Alliance, which was founded in March 2018. I'm glad both you're here, and I'm assuming we're going to hear a very valuable presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for the warm welcome, Paul, and everyone. Good morning, Ani Bojo. When I heard that we were going to have so many wonderful people here for this presentation, I asked my friend and colleague Natasha to help me out, in part because I thought all of you might enjoy having an opportunity to talk to someone from one of the fishing families directly about what's happening on the lake. And Natasha will be able to tell you more about what's happening on Lake Huron. It was a funny thing for me because I've been working on global warming since the 80s. Have any of you been working on it for a really long time as well? I bet quite a few of you are, right? But I didn't understand what was happening on the Great Lakes until I met Natasha and heard stories from Andrew about being on the water, and also from the other fishing families in the communities, in the Anishinaabe communities that have spent most of their lives on the water. So we thought that it would be particularly nice for you to have a little bit of a different perspective this morning about climate change and the effects that it's having. And so we're talking mainly about the effects of climate change on Lake Huron further north than where you are, but some of the data is applicable for the whole lake. And as you know, there's no like defining line in a lake. The water moves and the fish don't just go to a certain line and that's the edge of their municipality or anything. So that water is common. And as I'm sure you all know, in Anishinaabe view, water is life, and something that's really important for all of us and how we live and how we go about doing things. So I'm just going to share my screen so that I can start with our our presentation. Can everybody see my screen how it is right now? And I'm gonna try to get it to play so that it's fuller. Does that work for everybody? Okay, awesome. So we're calling it the two-eyed seeing approach because there is a Mi'kmaq elder who talks about this, about the idea that it's important to look at things with both an Indigenous lens as well as an academic science lens when you're looking at what's happening. And that's really what we're embodying with the Bogatawat Alliance, is trying to be able to meld those things together and do real reconciliation and climate justice in order to be able to talk about what's happening, and also doing a lot of actions around what we're going to do in order to be able to deal with it. So this is just an overview of what we're going to be talking about, and we'll try to be quick and stay to the half an hour. If anybody could give us maybe a 5-minute warning before the end when you'd like us to wrap up, then it will give us a few minutes just to complete our thoughts. That would be wonderful. But we will try to get through this relatively quickly.
Paul, can you do that, please?
Okay. So Natasha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name is Natasha Akwenzi. As you see in the picture, it's a much younger picture of my husband and I when we were, our children were young and we were a little cuter at the time. And there's my husband fishing on Georgian Bay. As you see, he lifts and sets his nets by hand, and he fishes out of a small boat. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it's some of the people that we brushed shoulders with a few times. We've worked with Chef Jamie Kennedy, and also we've met the Prince. My whole family got to. So we've been in the fishing industry. My husband, since he was about 9, he was taught by his uncles, and he introduced me. I was a vegetarian. I still am a vegetarian. He introduced me to commercial fishing and farming. And Victoria, your turn.
Yeah, sorry. It sounds like my connection is a little unstable, so I'll try to make sure that I change things early. I think my introduction was pretty strong, other than I love both the forests and the water. So I feel more like an amphibian. Because I really care a lot. I've done a lot of tree planting, but I also love spending time in the water, and including doing videography and that kind of thing. And years ago, Chief Randall Coggy of Saugeen First Nation convinced me that one of the most important things I could do with my time is raising Indigenous voices about climate change, because they have more moral authority after seeing the changes over generations and having the stories passed down on the land where I'm living now. And so that's kind of how I ended up shifting over from being more involved. I was very heavily involved in politics for many years, and I've switched more into a local grassroots role, not as much as an activist or lobbyist, but it's just somebody who tries to get things done. Natasha and I do a lot of laughing, but we also get a huge amount of things done. And we're not going to be able to explain all of them to you today, but we'll give you a bit of a taste. So with the Bogatawat Alliance, we formed because Natasha's husband wanted to do some scientific research on the lake, and she heard that I was a good climate change person to talk to. So out of the phone call, we ended up forming a not-for-profit, and we've been able to raise about, let's see, at least $280,000 in the last couple of years, primarily to do projects where we're gathering knowledge in the community, like in the Chippewas of Nawash and Saugeen, and hearing the stories from the elders, passing those stories on both to the public and to the youth, and looking at how climate change is affecting the lake, hearing those stories, and doing active stewardship on the land. So as you can see here, this was our early board members, and we're a mix. It's a majority of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation members, and then we have a few allies on our board as well, but it's an Indigenous led and managed organization. So my role is more supportive of the direction that the people in the community want to have. I'm hoping that there we go. So here's the numbers. So, and we've also done more than 100 events or activities to date. So we're really productive in doing things even in the middle of the in the pandemic. So over to Natasha again.
So these are the changes that the fishers are seeing. The whitefish numbers are declining. Lake trout numbers are increasing. There's less bycatch being caught, like burbot, suckers, gizzard shads, and pickerel numbers are increasing. So this is where I get to have a little bit of fun. Some of the myth busters. Is this a typical fisher? And is this a typical kind of boat that we use? This is the truth. This is my husband fishing. You know, he just doesn't have as many tattoos, but you know, he still does a pretty good job. And this is the type of boat that we use, one of the other ones. This is one of the bigger boats. This is a tug compared to my husband's punt. And then there's another. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, we put a slide about the Great Lakes in because Natasha's been finding, she's been presenting to quite a few universities during the pandemic. And a lot of times people don't know what the names of the lakes are. So we're kind of placing it now in our presentations just to make sure that everybody knows what they are. I'm sure all of you. Oh, there's a question that a difference between a tug and a punt. A punt is a smaller boat that just has a small engine, and a tug is a much bigger one. But they're both used commercially. But in a punt, the one that's on the left, it's usually by hand. Like, so you can see in the picture that Andrew is pulling the nets in with his hands, whereas on the tug, there's a mechanism for pulling the fish in. And so we have a Dr. John Anderson, who was one of the founding members of our board, and he's a retired fisheries scientist. He actually studied the cod collapse in Newfoundland. But he's originally from Ontario, and when he moved back, he's been doing a lot of climate change presentations. He starred in his own regional documentary called Resilience, talking about how the communities are addressing climate change around Grey and Bruce counties. But he likes to gather data for us in order to put things together. And so we wanted to show you this one briefly, that one of the things that is being found is that the water temperatures are going way up. The water temperature is rising at 2 to 3 times the air temperature on Lake Huron. Another one that is of concern is that the ice cover has gone down significantly. John predicts that if the trends continue the way they are, by 2061, there will not be ice cover most of the time on Lake Huron. And then the water levels are really fluctuating. So that's another thing that's really concerning to a lot of people, is that it's not like water levels always fluctuate, but they're fluctuating a lot faster, and there's a lot of erosion along the shorelines based on that. And everyone needs to be aware of that erosion when they're planning developments along the shoreline. I just saw a question. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe Natasha, when you get a chance to talk, then get a chance to talk. Maybe you can answer those ones now.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, do we know why whitefish are declining and trout are increasing? Well, the whitefish, the environment is, the home is being really affected by climate change. There's no ice coverage. So the babies, they spawn on shoals. which is on Lake Huron and on Georgian Bay side. And when the babies hatch, they need ice coverage to protect them from being battered against the shoals and against the shorelines. With no ice coverage, they're exposed. Also, water temperature is predicting when they actually hatch, because when they hatch, it's a certain temperature that they have to reach to be able to do so. So the temperatures are staying warm. Whitefish are a cold water fish. So if they're not hatching at the proper times, and of course, if the ice is not there, the young ones are having a serious issue. I will ask Victoria possibly later on to do her whitefish demonstration of what a baby whitefish will have to go through to survive, but we'll have to remember to ask her to do that later. She does a very good explanation of it. Also with the whitefish, the trout are increasing. The trout are also being stocked by the Ministry of Natural Resources. And they're a huge, huge predator fish. And the whitefish are not. They are, they're like little vacuum cleaners. They clean snails and worms and what have you off the bottom, and other little fish that they can suck up. They have no teeth. So when you're putting a bunch of predators in that need to eat other fish, it can really tip the scales one way or the other. Whitefish are considered more valuable to commercial fisheries. A whitefish can sell for $2.80 per pound, roughly, give or take, where trout can sell anywhere from 25 cents to 50 cents a pound. So the fishers have to catch more fish, more trout, to be able to make the same amount of money as whitefish. We see it more as, my husband and I, when we were fishing, we saw it more as whitefish were our top typical fish. We used to catch 200 pounds of whitefish with our eyes closed, and we had to go looking for trout. Now we have to go looking for whitefish, and we're lucky if we find 2 fish in a day, which equals about 6 to 8 pounds. And we catch about 150 to 175, possibly even more trout. So it was really concerning to us, because at the beginning, I don't think I'm myself as being really old. I just had my birthday, and I didn't think I would ever see this in my lifetime. And the cormorant predation on fish populations. We do have cormorants up here. Yes, they eat a lot, and yes, they're pigs. But I'm more worried about the trout and how the environment is dictating the lives of the whitefish. And it's a bigger problem, climate change, because we need to control the temperatures of the water so that the habitat and the water quality stays as good as it is right now. Okay, Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. And there are a couple of things I wanted to mention too. One of the things that I learned from the fishermen is that it's become much more dangerous to go out on the water. So on average, it used to be that they could get out on the water 5 days a week, of course, when there was no ice. And it went down to 2 days a week. And for people that are setting nets, you normally set a net one day and pick it up the next day. And if you can only have 2 days, then it makes it much harder for them to be able to find times when they can go out safely. So if I remember correctly, and Natasha, tell me if I'm wrong, I think that it used to be pretty standard to go out up to about 10 knots of wind. And now people are going up to 20 knots. I know one of our board members, Guy Najawan, whose tug was had the pretty Christmas lights. He was out on the lake when there were water tornadoes on the lake, when there were like the water funnels, and it picked his tug up and spun around on the lake. And that's like, the storms are getting a lot worse than they used to be, and people take more risks going out luckily, the guy was safe and got back safely. But I remember looking out on the water that day. I was on a visit down in Port Elgin, and I was just amazed to see all of those the water funnels over the lake. And it's really concerning for the fishermen that a lot more people are like there's a lot more danger and more risk, and it's already a dangerous profession to be in.
Up there, northern Lake Huron.
There's a question in here about the herring populations. There's a big crisis with a lot of the fish in Lake Huron in particular, but also like all the Great Lakes, in part because we have zebra and quagga mussels now, and they have technically changed the type of lake that it is. I forget the name of it right now. I'm kind of spacing it, but it used to be that the diaperea in the lake would go up and down at night and in the daytime. So they would come up at night in order to be closer to the surface. And then when in the day when the fish could see them better, they used to go down to the bottom in order to save themselves. And diaperea are little tiny creatures in the water that are kind of the base of the food chain for a lot of the lakes. And the diaperea have gone down, I think 80 to 90% in Lake Huron. So a lot of the base of the food chain is gone, and they still don't quite know why. But one of the reasons probably is like quagga mussels. Quagga mussels can go up to 300 feet deep, and they're basically filter mussels, and they eat diaperea as well as plankton and like lots of other things that are in the lake that are the base food for most of the small fish to be able to eat. So when you lose a lot of the food that's in the base of the food chain, it makes its way up in the food chain, and then it's a lot harder on all of the fish. So the invasive species in the lakes are having a huge effect, as well as the water temperature, and you know, it's really affecting the shorelines, and the wind speeds are way up, and the storms come in a lot quicker. If you follow us, the Bogatawan Alliance on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, Natasha posts up every day with what the weather is like. And she also gives warnings around storms, because when people that are in fishing families have to be very aware of the weather, and especially the marine forecast. And so Natasha always lets me know whenever there's a huge storm coming in, so that I can make sure that I'm ready if the power goes out or, you know, anything like that. So if you ever want that early morning, then follow the Bogatawan Alliance. And there's another question that the introduction of salmon has definitely upset the ecology and how the ecosystems work. It's like whenever you introduce predators, then it changes around how things work. Like they introduced like lake trout because they were some of the other predators in the lake were going away, and they thought that would be a good thing to reintroduce, but they didn't realize that it was going to they were also going to eat a lot of the whitefish. Like one of the fish that one of the fishermen brought in for us to look at, there was a lake trout, and it had two whitefish in its belly. So like they're voracious eaters and really predate the whitefish. And as far as industrial pollution of water, and then I probably should keep going before I answer more questions. We can do that later as well if we have time. But we know they're studying the effect of Bruce Power on Lake Huron. And one of the things that we've heard the most about affecting the fish is the water temperature, because they use Lake Huron's water in order to cool their systems from the nuclear reactors. Like, of course, it's not a direct, you know, it's not the nuclear water per se that's going out, but they use it to cool when there's excess, when they don't need the reactors as much, basically. And they can raise the water temperature in the winter up to 13 degrees Celsius legally. So they can make a huge difference with how much water, like, because it's millions of liters of water like a day that they're exchanging in order to do that. So it's a really big concern to a lot of people that they're raising the temperature of the water so much. because that will reduce the ice cover. It changes how the baby fish and other things grow. It's basically created like a little tropical lagoon around Bruce Power. So back to Natasha again.
Is this the slide we're on?
The whitefish recovery,
Okay.
the tobacco ties.
Fair enough. So this is what I do every morning. I haven't done it this morning yet because I was in a rush to get to this meeting. But what I do every morning is I go down to the shores of Georgian Bay and put a tobacco tie on a branch of a tree that's right on the shoreline. And what I'm doing is I'm asking for, well, I'm thanking the whitefish for staying with our people for so many generations. And then I'm also asking for them to accept our apology for us harming Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, their home, because, you know, the whitefish haven't done this to themselves. We've done it. And then I'm also requesting guidance for correcting it for future generations. And I take some time, I take some pictures, I do some thinking about it, and then I come back up and I start my day. I start my chores with the, milking the goats and chasing the chickens and what have you. But this is how I start my day most mornings, giving just 10, 15 minutes of ceremony to the whitefish.
Do you want to talk about what we're doing?
Do I want to talk about what we're doing?
Or do you want me to?
Well, I can talk about the Yaqui Guardians and I'll let you talk about everything else.
Okay.
Because I was the one that got to play with the Yaqui Guardians quite a bit more. We hired 2 youth Yaqui Guardians, as we called them, which means Earth Guardians. And as you see, AKA is the beginning of our name, my last name. But anyway, I can touch base with that later. But yes, Land Guardians. So we hired them and we introduced them into identifying plants, picking apples, making cider, chasing my farm animals around, doing filming, doing a whole lot of things, but mostly outside, and keeping them active and keeping them away from the tablets and cell phones, and just introducing them to being outside again, and connecting them to the earth. Okay, Victoria.
And you may wonder with the an innovation being a trailer, but we wrote a grant before the pandemic came around, in order to have a trailer on Natasha and Andrew's property, so that when people came up to be able to teach in the community, that there would be a place for them to stay, but also that we could have experiences with people coming into the community and staying on reserve, and having access to real experiences of understanding the Anishinaabe culture, so they could have a language class, that they could go for a hike with a guide from the community, like that. It would be part of our social enterprise, where we would be helping the community to have more income, because it's a more remote reserve at Nayashingaming. And but so it could work both ways from an educational standpoint, so we could bring people in to help the community, but also we could bring people in to understand the community better, including the history and what's happening with the environment as well. And we're right in the middle of starting up an online store, again, to be able to help support the people in the community. And most of the things that we would be selling would be traditional crafts. But we're also going to be allowing people to sell like experiences, or to be able to do webinars and to be able to teach from the community as well. So that's pretty exciting. We're doing a lot of work on creating documentaries right now. So we just almost finished a film school with 7 Anishinaabe youth from Saugeen and Nawash, and that have been learning from world-class documentary makers on how to be able to create films. And we've got a lot of interest, and we're working on more around that, including we're looking into using augmented reality in order to do more education along the Bruce Trail in particular. And we've done kind of fun and more natural kinds of things, like running a pottery workshop where people were, part of what they were taught was where there was clay in the community to be able to take it and be able to process it to be able to make their own pottery. So then they would be able to be more self-sufficient in using local materials in order to do those things. So I'm going to keep going. Oh, so I've got a little pun to break up our thing here. What happened when the white fish got famous?
Became a starfish.
Any guesses? Yes. Of course you got it, Paul. And we use integrating traditional knowledge like as something that is the lens and the base for everything we're doing. And Albert Marshall, the Mi'kmaq elder, is the one who has really been at the forefront of doing this. And one of the things that I've been taught by elders in the community is that how sacred a responsibility it is for First Nations or Indigenous people to be able to be responsible for the land. But it's not just like from an environmental standpoint, it's also cultural and spiritual, that because they believe that everything is alive and it's all connected, and that they say there's a term they say called all our relations. And that means like the rocks and the insects and the animals and the fish and the trees, and like everything is all part of that and alive, and something that we have a responsibility to collectively. So you know, that like taking care of water is a very serious spiritual responsibility. I have a friend, Shirley John, who's a water carrier, and she does ceremony every morning in order to thank the water, and everywhere she goes, she takes water from one place to another and talks to the water and sings to the water. There's another elder from Nashingaming, Charlene Winger Jones, who does similar things every morning. She goes out to the back of her house on Georgian Bay and she sings to the water. And those are very important acts for people to be doing in order to maintain and try to be able to help. There's a lot of impact on resources just in general with water. Water is seen as a life force, like, and it's in part because and women are normally the carriers of that, because the women have, when they're pregnant, there's water around a baby. And that water in us is part of the water that's inside of us. I don't know, Natasha, if I'm explaining that very well, but I'm trying. It affects a lot of the responsibilities are very seasonal. So a lot of the programming things we do have to do with the seasons, and helping people to get outside and understanding what's happening at different times. So we also do a lot of discussions about traditional ecological knowledge, and there's a few things that the elders have talked to me about wanting to be able to share with other people. So I put a slide in there about this, that if you're ever talking with an elder, that they may not always have like scientific wording for something, but they are like technically seen as expert witnesses in trials. I know someone who recently got a PhD, that their whole PhD was through storytelling. That's it was a Haudenosaunee lady that did that. And walking in both worlds, like elders quite often are trying to be able to see with two eyes, and they're walking in both worlds. So they're trying to translate one thing to another. And especially if it's like Natasha's mom is a fluent Anishinaabe speaker. And when she's trying to explain things, like she's running a language class online for us right now. And, you know, sometimes it's hard for her to get the words out in English because it's really, the languages aren't very comparable. Anishinaabe is so much more descriptive. So if you ever get a chance to be able to learn a little bit of the language and understand the meanings of it, I think you'll be really happily surprised at just the nuances and what can be, how how one word can mean many things, and that all relate to the thing that you're talking about. And there's a lot of observations from elders around climate change and how the environment's being affected, because they've been seeing it for a long time, and they track that. It's part of their livelihood and sustenance, as well as it being something that was very traditional to do in the passing of the stories. At Saugeen, for instance, I heard a story once of when some Anishinaabe people came down from the north over the land bridge that came down from Manitoulin. And so that would have been around the time of when the glaciers were melting, right? So that was, 10,000 plus years ago that story has been carried down and continues in the community. And having that long-term knowledge is really important for us to understand, and to listen to people that have that long knowledge. They've seen a lot of water fluctuations and changes, and they read the environment in a different way than we do. They notice a lot of little things, like if the top of a tree is dying, or if things are colored like there's a different color than normal, or when I've heard from elders that when there's a lot of berries on the tree or on some bushes, that it's going to be a hard winter. There are things like that they know from observing and over multiple generations. Natasha, do you have anything more around that you'd like to say?
Well, just relating it back to the fish. That's why when we noticed the whitefish decline, we have been talking about it for years. And it was just recently, the last few years, that it started taking notice. But we noticed it at least 8 years ago, that we were starting to sound the alarm, and that we weren't really listened to. And also, we had noticed a long time ago the algae that was found really deep in the water in Georgian Bay. And we were told many times that it should not be there, and it's not there, and yet we were finding it. So it was one of those things of, it was good that we were taking note of it, but at the same time, it would have been nice if somebody had listened to us, that we could have done something about it a long time ago.
Very fair. It's one of the reasons why you started the Bogatawa Alliance as well, right? Is to try to get the word out about these things more. And I see more questions coming in. I think I'll keep going on the presentation, and then we'll see what time we have for questions at the end. We do have a lot of fun with what we're doing. This is Natasha's Aquaman that she's got in order to be able to monitor what's going on in the lake. And so she takes pictures of Aquaman from time to time to be able to see whether he's iced up, or if the wave, how high the wave levels are, and that kind of thing. You'll see photos of Aquaman again if you follow us on any of our social media. And Aquaman is prominent in most things we do. But we have a lot of fun doing events where we do even do things like puzzles, and just having a nice time together. Or we right now we're doing a lot of things like discussing a movie that we watched. We're going to be doing forget it was what the name of it is, this Littlest Small Farm or something, Biggest Small Farm. So I know I'm not right with the name. But anyway, we do a lot of online conversations in case any of you would ever like to be able to join them. So we're trying to model a way of reconciliation and being able to bring people into the things that we're doing. So even from down where you are, if you ever want to participate in any of our online workshops or webinars, you're definitely welcome to do that. We keep planning to do more. We will be offering more Anishinaabe classes, for instance, and they're free. So we've got a class right now that's running, and we have over 40 people in it that are learning from Helen Brizard Young, who's Natasha's mother. And but I think community members have told me that they really would like it if people got to know their communities better. So talking more directly with people, offering to be able to help and support the direction of what the community members know needs to be done. Because there's a basic respect in following the direction of the people that have lived experience and really understand the situation. So that's kind of what I'm doing with most of my time, and have been for a number of years, is trying to support that. Beach cleanups are something Natasha talks about a lot. Do you want to mention any other things that you think people could do to be able to help out?
Well, just do something. Plain and simple. Really just do something. Go out, organize a cleanup, plant some trees, do small changes in your household, like reusable bags, get rid of that plastic wrap, model good practices for other people, talk about it with other people, share your passions, your concerns with other people, talk about climate change. Don't shy away from that topic. It's a heavy topic, and we need to talk about it for our future generations. And when I talk about future generations, I don't mean just my grandchildren. I'm looking at 7 generations. So that's a long way from now. But again, just to do something, anything, and then to encourage other people to do the same thing in small ways or big ways.
Victoria and Natasha, perhaps we're coming towards the end. We usually like to have a question and answer session at the end, and there's quite a few questions that you could address if you wished. So we have probably about 8 to 10 minutes left.
Well, it's perfect because we were at the last slide.
Well done.
So just to wrap it up though, Natasha and I both think that it's really important to be joyful and happy and laugh and have fun, even though we're facing the biggest crisis that has been facing humanity basically ever, right? We're trying to find those actions that we can help share and help other people to be able to do as many actions themselves, and to be able to at least have some contact with being outside, with the weather, planting a tree, just understanding what's going on. Like, I was an organic farmer for many years, and I can't believe in my original climate presentations for the first year, I did about 90 presentations in 2007, all over Ontario to about 30,000 people. And I would ask every audience if they understood how their food got to them, like how it was grown or raised, and how it was processed and packaged and, shipped and transported, and how it got to their plate at dinner. And 95% of my audiences admitted that they didn't understand it. And just basically understanding where our food comes from and the connection between the environment and climate change and water, all of these things to our daily lives is really, really important. And it's, as you can see in this quote, it's around the kinds of relationships that we build. So I know one of the questions was like, how do you engage more people from the First Nations or Indigenous communities around you? And a lot of it is building that relationship and being really respectful in doing it, and humble, because I was giving climate presentations since the 80s. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've learned so much from the communities in Saugeen and Nawash about climate change. And I thought that I had a pretty good grounding in it. So, it's the kind of thing where if you're just humble and listen and try to build the relationships, like even during the pandemic, there are lots of people that have not lots, but there's enough tech capability for people to be able to do, a web discussion or even have phone calls to be able to hear about it. So just reaching out and trying to build a real relationship is probably the most important step. So on here, you'll see, I'll leave this up for a few minutes, but it's got Natasha's phone number in case anyone wants to call her. But we've also got like Facebook, Twitter. You can email us. We have a donation email address. that has a direct deposit for it. And we also have a YouTube channel where we have some interviews with the fishermen if you want to hear directly from them some of the changes that they're seeing on the water. So you can explore a little bit through there. And that's the end of our formal presentation. So for me to be able to see the chat, though, I have to get out of this screen sharing to be able to
How
see.
if I read the questions out? That's what we normally do, is I would paraphrase them, if that's okay, and then you can answer them and I can keep rolling it down.
Sounds great.
So Stan Martin asked about industrial pollution, but particularly, do you see plastic in the fish that you catch? We have a commercial fishery here in Sarnia, and they've said that they do not find plastic pollution in amongst the fish that they normally catch and sell. Do you find plastic pollution?
We haven't found plastic pollution, but then again, they might be in the fish. It's just we would have to send it to a lab to be able to see it, like with the microscope.
Yeah. So there might be small particles, but not large ones.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you had any discussion with Bruce Nuclear about using the warm water for something useful rather than dumping it into the lake? At one point, there was talk about hydroponic greenhouses and so on. Have you had any discussions with them about that?
We haven't, but Bruce Power used to have houses where they would use the hot water, and they stopped doing that a long time ago. So it's something that they're very aware of. They used to do that, and they don't see the benefit of it anymore. So it's a really it's a serious issue. Like one of the smartest solutions that I've heard of is that they create the most surplus heat for the water when the electricity has a surplus. So if the surplus could be used, then there would be less heat going out into the lake. So like Saugeen First Nation has partnered with Carlson Energy and a group in order to be able to look at doing hydrogen production by using the surplus electricity and creating hydrogen from water. So that was one of the ways that that surplus electricity could be used.
We have a group here in Sarnia that's looking at something similar to export green electrons from surplus power, and the Bruce is an obvious place to do it. Okay, plastic. Dave Marshall asks, do you have a number indicating how many large-scale industrial farm operations, for instance, hogs and beef on Lake Huron, that are allowing their waste to drain into the lake? Large-scale farming and waste runoff?
We don't have those numbers ourselves, but it would be really interesting for us to know. I do know that it creates algal blooms all along the coast of Lake Huron, and that it is a really serious issue, and of course on lots of other Great Lakes as well. But it is something that happens, but it's from where we are, it's a lot more south where those types of farms are. So we don't see the effect as much up on the peninsula.
Right. I think you've answered the one about our club is actively trying to recruit First Nations members. Any tips to make membership more attractive? And you said to build relationships with the local First Nations and to definitely try to get them involved. And you invited us to participate in some of your activities, so thank you for that. Hope Marks from Jamaica says, based on all I've heard, would you say that pleasure boats have created a negative impact?
Depends on what kind of pleasure boat. As a commercial fisher, we've had a few incidents with like safety issues for the fishers, not paying attention to where the nets are and to fishers setting nets.
Right.
My husband's been caught a few times where he's had the net in his hand trying to set it out and having boats come zipping around the islands. and running over his net, and luckily not getting caught on his net, because it would have pulled him into the water. And they most likely would have continued on, and he would have been in Georgian Bay. We also know he has seen people taking the waste water and dumping it overboard.
That
we
is in
also-
fact illegal, isn't it?
It is, but you have to catch them.
Yeah.
And so there are, and then there's those speed boats that go along the shore that just stir up everything, you know, like you're talking about shoals and protected, not protected areas, but, you know, areas that you want to keep protected for the young fish. And, you know, the speed boats are zipping over top of them and causing quite the wake. So it is concerning. But again, it's a long process to change people's behaviors, and not everybody thinks about the life underneath the water and how it's disturbing it. They just see it as a playground.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Wayne Scarrow to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the club to what is an excellent presentation. As you can see from some of the comments in the chat line, it's been very well received by our members. So Wayne, would you like to thank our speakers, please? Wayne?
Unmute,
Okay.
Wayne.
I am unmuted now.
Ah,
Okay, it took a couple of tries at it, but I got it. So on behalf of the members of Sarnia Lambton Golden Cake Kiwanis Club and our guests today, I would like to thank you for this morning's very interesting and very important presentation on climate change, particularly when it looks at lake effects and a different perspective than what we see from worldwide scientific fact. Having worked for 30 years in the environmental research team, working primarily on a wastewater treatment, I was definitely interested in hearing your ideas on climate change this morning. Having this background, I think I can appreciate the trials and efforts needed to guard and protect our climate from very possible detrimental changes and what effect those dangers might have on people and on the ecosystem. We have to believe, despite the naysayers, that scientific facts that are told to us and what's happening in our ecosystem, and try and solve or control this problem. I think that you can tell by the number of variety of questions posed by your audience today, will start or renew more discussions of concerns, and they will certainly be discussed past this meeting this morning. If you were at our regular meeting, please, not on Zoom, before you could leave the hall or before you could leave the room, I'm sure you would be approached by very many individual members to give you their personal thoughts and ask even more questions. And as a token of our appreciation for your presentation this morning, we'll be reporting to you this certificate of appreciation that you see on the screen. Again, thanks for your presentation, and thanks for continuing all the good work you're doing regarding climate change locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we hope
We're
to
happy to
maintain our
present other
contacts.
places.